Hi, everyone. Today, what we're going to do is look at our last symbolic contractionist work article. And we'll be looking at a piece by Patrick Archer, who is a good friend of mine. Went to school together at Iowa State University. And originally, Pat and I were going to discuss the article together for you guys. But unfortunately, he had some family emergencies come up. But everything is good. But so instead of kind of talking about his article with him, I'll just take a few minutes to go through the piece and again connect the dots to what we talked about earlier in the semester. So when I go through this, I think of two different class periods. First, the 17th of September, when we start to look at symbol makers and users. Basically, here we need to capture that kind of recognition of reality being a social construct rather than reality appearing out of thin air, being natural. Rather, people create reality and kind of from that bottom up, you learn the socialization and you kind of practice that and build one social world from that micro level on up. And so we start to see that here, and we can connect it to the 20th of October lecture when we looked at how social problems can be recognized as social constructs as well. So it's not only kind of reality in general that is socially constructed, it's different aspects within our realities. And one aspect we can look at as a social construct is the aspect of social problems. So here we talked about, why do certain um, issues get the label of a problem and other issues do not? Why do certain social problems get identified as significant, others are more marginalized? And who has the power to make these definitions and kind of reinforce them? And so we can kind of combine the earlier piece, kind of recognizing the social construction of reality, to this piece here by focusing specifically within a reality on the social construction of social problems. And that kind of lends itself to the Archer article, where Pat basically proposes a shift away from a more traditional approach to social problems within symbolic contractionism, basically kind of focusing on how social problems are socially constructed, to more of a focus on what Pat highlights as interest of individuals. And so here we'll first kind of look at a couple problems with the more traditional approach that you see in symbolic interactionism, and then Pat's kind of reorganizing the focus to be more inclusive, more kind of generalizable. So I'll get to that after we first discuss the problems. So one problem is you're kind of limited in the sense that these two different approaches within SI, looking at the social construction of social problems, the objectionist approach, basically here is when you're trying to be totally kind of objective and use a certain criteria, it's going to be problematic because kind of each is its own case. When you're looking at kind of a case by case study, you can't use the same conceptualization of what you mean by a social problem. So the approach is going to kind of lack a coherent conceptualization of social problems. Now, the other approach, the constructionist approach, kind of lacks the ability to separate claims making activities and the conditions under which these activities are taking place. So overall, here, we can see that individuals are kind of acting and trying to label something as a problem, but often it kind of misses the objective conditions under which the earlier approach kind of focuses on. So again, you kind of have this, you know, two sides of the same coin almost, but they tend to kind of ignore, uh, each other. And that's hopefully you've kind of learned that often when it comes to a theory, it's not kind of one or the other. Often it's kind of a mix and match of various theories coming together to make the kind of the best theory possible. So, in addition to those limitations, we can look at problems when it comes to being able to generalize findings. So, here, when you're focused on kind of case by case basis, it's hard to generalize kind of what you found to other cases, to social problems in general. And then when it comes to focusing on claims making, not all claims tie into social problems. So there's plenty of times people are making claims that have little or nothing to do with social problems, just other aspects of our social world. And so Pat basically proposes that you kind of scrap the old way of kind of, you know, really not letting everybody see the full picture when you're looking at social problems through that symbolic interactions lens. And he proposes that we kind of spin it into focusing more on the interest claims. Because when you focus on the interest claims and basically what's motivating the individual to make a certain claim, or perhaps to not make a claim, when you focus on that, that helps kind of bridge the limitations that we talked about. Because what goes on here, you're focusing still kind of on the individual and what motivates them to make claims, what type of claims they're making is about kind of me or is about us. And then with that, you kind of bring in the social historical context. So here you start to not only kind of see the one side of the coin, but you bring the other side of the coin with it. So you're looking at the individual acting in terms of presenting an interest, but also you recognize individuals operating within kind of a larger context filled with different social variables, filled with different historical realities. So that's kind of one advantage that Pat kind of talks about. If you focus more on the interest claims, you're going to be less kind of divided, and rather than not being able to see the forest through the trees or only seeing the forest and not seeing the trees, you kind of bring everything together. And so another kind of another advantage of this approach, Pat argues, is that you can actually generalize much better your findings. So here you start to look at, again, not necessarily the case by case basis, but the individuals and kind of what they're doing within the cases. And then when you kind of bring it down to that level, yes, the cases may differ, but you can start to see overlap and similarities. You can start to see differences and distinctions when it comes to what's kind of motivating people to make these claims that something is a social problem or something is not. And again, kind of how they spin their claims. So that very paternal way of doing things, or is it more about kind of helping kind of a greater good? And in addition to this, you can kind of recognize that yes, sometimes claims have to do with social problems, but not all the time. So again, you kind of can expand your focus in terms of social construction of social reality by not limiting yourself to only looking at social problems per se, but looking at kind of other social realities within people kind of making these interest claims. I think that'd be a very kind of interesting kind of focus of research because here you can maybe start to see the beginnings or perhaps the end of social problems, but still to see the interest claims in play. So overall, I see kind of Pat's article really kind of trying to bridge the gap between kind of that very micro focus we started out the semester with, and then more the kind of a macro focus that we ended the semester with. But again, kind of bridging the gap between the two and kind of recognizing kind of the micro and the macro that we have often sometimes referred to kind of the meso level, the individual acting. And when you make that the focus of analysis, you can start to bridge the gap between the micro and the macro, and you can start to really focus on the individual. And when you focus on the individual, you can start to see things that are more generalizable compared to when you only focus on a specific condition. So overall, I'll kind of leave that there for today. And basically where we're at now is focusing on that final paper. And so, as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. And we'll kind of end that there for now and focus on that final paper.